and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This time I'm talking to Rachel Gillespie about her stunning grand New Zealand landscapes. Rachel is a full-time astrophotography guide in the Mackenzie Country in New Zealand and hosts guests in a number of properties around the region. Her passion is the night sky and astrophotography is her love. She moved to the Aoraki Mount Cook Dark Sky Reserve as a permanent home where she's a mum to 3 and runs her busy guiding business from Twizel. Her passion for teaching others how to get their cameras off auto and capture her beautiful country is her life's work. She takes us to her special secret spots and locations and talks about how she balances family and work in her busy schedule. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the podcast. How are you going?
Hey, Grant. Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Very pleased to have you on the show. Been looking at your stuff and the beautiful landscapes in New Zealand, and really pleased that you've said yes and agreed to join me. So
absolutely, we've got to keep that rivalry going from over the ditch, right?
absolutely. If we can't win at rugby, we might win at photography. But I tell you what, I think you win with some of the landscapes you guys have got. The mountains tend to drag the eyeballs a little bit more than the outback does.
Yeah, that's it. I actually used to live in Aussie for 5 years, so I have a bit of an idea. Yeah.
Whereabouts?
And good old Coogee Beach.
Coogee, oh yeah. Oh, you'd be familiar
where all
with
the Kiwis go.
Some of the haunts where I go. I shoot down around Coogee and Bronte and Bondi quite a bit.
Yes, I've seen some of your shots. They're beautiful. It actually is lovely to, I guess, get that reminisce type thing, and that's what I love about landscapes, isn't it? When you go to different places than somebody else's local. So cool.
Yeah, no, it's good to see people's local areas. So what? I guess what's the Rachel Gillespie story? Just tell us a bit about yourself and who you are and what you do and why you do it.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, it's a bit of a journey, as we all have one. I'm a mum, so that's my number one job. I've got 3 awesome kids. They are currently almost 14 next week. 12 and 9, so I've got 2 boys and a girl, and I'm a single parent, so my life is pretty busy being a mum. But I also have been very fortunate over the last number of years to become a full-time photographer here in New Zealand, and previously, before 2020, I was full-time photography guiding, particularly astrophotography and a bit of landscapes. So yeah, it's been a pretty cool experience, and at that time was based out of the Aoraki Mount Cook National Park area in Twizel, which you may know of.
Yep.
And Lake Tekapo, around that region for a long time. So I kind of grew up around this area as well, around South Canterbury and Tekapo. So
sure.
It's pretty cool. So my story kind of starts in photography only just 4 years ago. I used to work in tourism for a bit before that, and prior to that I was actually a life coach and business coach using some interesting techniques around quantum physics, and I think that's probably why I'm really interested in photography, because my brain is sort of geared to understanding how things tick. So you'll be loving my New Zealand accent on these words. I just love to know how things work and why things are the way they are, and I think that's why I got really into astrophotography at the start, because I actually started out learning astrophotography first, so quite unusual probably compared to a lot of other photographers, and that was my passion. I actually ended up becoming friends with Mark G from the Art of Night, who you may have heard of, and he's a pretty awesome astrophotographer here in New Zealand, based out of Wellington. And just learnt some cool stuff from him, went on a few adventures, and probably for me, my photography has always been about the adventure more than it has about actually techniques. So over the years, I learnt a lot of techniques that obviously have now become a big part of what I teach. But initially, it was more about the adventure and the experience. So I started out with a Canon 6D Mark I, which I still use and love. And now I've got two 6Ds because I often take people out for tuition. And I probably, to be fair, have done, I'd say, about 10 years worth of learning in 4 years. I don't watch telly. I'm just obsessed with knowing everything I can find out about what I do. And I love looking at other people's work. I think this sort of stuff, what you're doing, is awesome because you just can learn one little technique from somebody having a yarn or just looking at somebody's photos online and seeing what settings they've used, and that can transform your ability. So I just love the community. I find that it's just such a awesome, inclusive space to live in, and for me it's become something I've dedicated myself to as my lifestyle. So I was quite determined to actually make that my lifestyle, and I probably, because 9 years ago I went through women's refuge, and took my kids away from an unhealthy relationship. So I think my passion is equally as important to me, to be fair, as everything else. And I just was lucky enough to find something I'm kind of good at. I think I've got a bit of talent there, and I just seem to find shots that other people don't always see, or just go out and have a go. I think a lot of it's your attitude, and there's a lot of people out there who are so worried about the settings and getting it perfect rather than just going and enjoying the moment. So that would probably be my number one sort of tip, I guess, is just get out there and enjoy the moment, even if you've got a cell phone.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, I always say, the best the best camera you can have is the one that you've got with you.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't matter necessarily, what the gear is. I mean, yes, there are certain types of photography where the gear will matter. If you're doing sports photography, for example, you want something that can auto focus, in an nth of a second, because if you don't, then you're going to miss the shot, So
yeah.
And macro, if you haven't got a good macro lens, it's hard to do macro really well, But
absolutely.
But I think that's exactly right. It shouldn't be about necessarily all of the technical parts. That will come in time as you grow and learn. But it should definitely be about the enjoyment of the experience.
And I think, because I take a lot of people out in my guiding business, I take a lot of people out who are beginners or people who haven't done a lot. Generally, they're shooting on auto and maybe poked a stick at manual, but they're not necessarily shooting manual very often. And I think what I've found, maybe it's just the type of people that come to me, I don't know, but I've found that a lot of those people are have a bit of fear around shooting on manual because it might not be good enough, or they might make mistakes or whatever. And my whole advice is, look, just get in there and have a go. That's how you learn. You'll realise after you shoot a morning of sunrises and you get them back on your computer and they don't look right, that you'll actually go back and have another go. And we've all done that, I'm sure. Everybody that's on here listening, I'm sure everybody's done that to some degree. And particularly, I think, even though I started out in astro, what I had to do when I started doing landscapes was quite interesting for me, because my brain was naturally going towards the astro settings all the time. So I had to kind of retrain myself for landscapes, and it took me another good 6 to 8 months after I started doing photography to get that right, because I just wasn't in that frame of mind. So I honestly knew nothing about compositions or anything like that when I first started. So I was just like, okay, that looks cool. I'm going to have a go at that, and then I started doing a few landscape workshops and learning from other photographers. And for me, a lot of it was just what I'd call pause and relax, just watch what other people do.
Yeah.
Learn by asking good questions. And just a lot of it for the landscapes for me was I was really lucky. I think when I bought my camera, I got a 24-105 Canon lens, which was beautiful glass, so that helped a lot, obviously, as a sort of a go-to lens, and I still use that lens a lot today, and have sort of learned a lot about how to do panoramas and stitch them together and things like that through astrophotography, which I just applied to landscapes. So yeah. I've kind of intuitively gone along my road a fair bit, and then there are times where I've had to stop and go, actually, you know what, I'm not up to scratch on that topic. I need to learn some more things. So I think it's just really being accountable to yourself. If you're teaching photography like I do, you need to look at where you're missing your strengths and work on that, that kind of thing. And so I've done a lot of workshops with a lot of other photographers who are better than me to learn. I think that's helped me so much. And, just as I said earlier, looking at things like Instagram and going, okay, hey, that's an awesome shot. What camera were they using? What lens did they have? What settings did they use? And generally, when I first started, people used to put a lot of that information on their posts. So I learned a lot by just scrolling through there and having a good look. Sometimes I'd have a chat to people and just ask them what they're up to and, what they're doing. And I particularly have, been found people to be generally mostly really kind and obliging if you ask good questions. So that's been really cool.
I think as long as you're not sitting there saying, oh, hey, where was that? And you're asking, what camera did you use? I mean, you might ask what camera they use, but I think, what camera and settings and lens then sort of shows, okay, I know a little bit more about it than just, the standard, what camera did you use,
Yeah, exactly. And, I think we used to, when we first started photography, there were a group of us, we used to go on adventures together. So we'd spend like a week just going around the South Island, having a bit of fun, all just going out and taking photos and, learning from each other. And out of that group of 5 people I used to go out with, I was the newest to the game. So I probably, was the one that learnt the most, really. And so I was lucky to have that, sort of, I guess, connection through my travel business, which I had before photography, where I had some good mates that were photographers. And it's like anything, and I hate this saying, but it's true, that you become, the 5 people that you hang around, sort of thing, whatever that saying is, the one I mean. And it really does rub off. And, I know a few sort of corny sayings that people use, and you go, oh, whatever. These days, it's probably the younger ones probably don't even know what you're talking about. But, stick your hand in a pot of glue and something's going to stick has always been something that I've kind of liked. And I feel like that is still relevant. It's kind of timeless, and
absolutely
for me, I think that's been a really big part of it. So I've been really lucky to get some amazing opportunities because I am quite good at talking to people and connecting and making relationships. And I think that's been a big part of my success at the start, particularly as well, where people gave me an opportunity or gave me a start, gave me a go because I asked for one. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with in this game. If you want to make money out of photography, it's highly possible. And people used to say to me, oh, you'll never make enough money out of that. You're never going to be able to go full time. And I'd just be like, well, you just watch me, because that was the challenge I needed to go, right?
I just need somebody to say I can't do it, and then I do it.
Exactly. So So, I mean, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad was in business his whole life, and so we grew up as kids being around that, I guess. And, that's that same pot of glue thing again. Like, you just learned how to do that quite intuitively, I suppose. And I think at the end of the day, there's photography and then there's the photography business, and they're probably quite different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really. So, sometimes I feel a bit jealous that I'm not actually just going out doing photography for myself, because you're always on the job. So I quite like to try and factor a bit of that in, which can be quite challenging as a mum, to get some of my own personal photography time in. Can be quite challenging because I'm always busy working for somebody else or taking a workshop. And I'm pretty particular about taking workshops that I don't take many of my own photos, because that's not what I'm there for. I'm there to help people. So, it's a pretty cool industry though. And I think at the end of the day, the thing I love about Mackenzie Country is you're always coming to a different environment every single time you go to the same spots, because the weather is obviously a huge factor. And our 4 seasons are very defined. We get a lot of wind, snow, hail, sun, rain, etc. So, if we had a really big lightning storm the other week, it was pretty crazy. And I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time to actually catch a pretty cool photo. So, it's one of those things where I think for me, as I said earlier, it's always about the adventure, kind of good for the soul or something.
No, definitely. So can you tell me what came first? Was the decision to go full-time photography or doing workshops, and you sort of slid into turning that into full-time, or?
I read it first. Yeah, so how I actually started out first was really interesting, actually, and probably quite different to a lot of people, is that I started promoting other photographers before I even had a camera. So I was like selling workshops for other photographers and promoting them through my I used to own NZ Travel magazine, so I was promoting them through my magazine, and it was, I guess, the opportunity to promote other bigger names than myself. So that was how I sort of started out, and I was just going around with them running workshops and taking photos on my phone, and people were like, oh my God, did you take that on your phone? Like, what? Like, that's such a cool photo. And I was like, like, it's just off my phone, like, no big deal, And then I was like, maybe I should. I know. And then I was like, maybe, because I'm quite good at editing, because I have always used Photoshop for graphic design and stuff like that. So I just was like, maybe I should get a camera and have a go at this. So I just made a on the spot decision one day, like, I'm going to buy a camera. I didn't even think it through. I didn't have any plan. I just went and bought the camera, and I was like, I'm just going to give this a whirl. So I actually went on a 5-day photography tour with another photographer called Talman Madsen, who was tutoring the workshop, and we had a couple of clients. We went out, and we just were so lucky to have this amazing, incredible week. It was winter time. We ended up with Aurora, which was crazy. We had Milky Way rise at the Church of the Good Shepherd. We had snow. We had walked into the Hooker Valley track at -9 in crampons and took these amazing astro photos. I was just fizzing, and it was almost like an out-of-body experience, to tell you the truth. We virtually were on the road, driving from between Wanaka, the Lindis Pass, Mount Cook, Tekapo for 5 days, backwards and forwards, to basically the best spots that the weather was giving us, because we had all those pockets of weather we had to navigate. I was absolutely exhausted afterwards, but it was the coolest, a massive introduction into it. And so after I had been taking these random phone snaps, I then shared, these 10 or so DSLR 6D shots that were auroras and Milky Ways and stuff, and people were just freaking out. It was just funny. I was just, they were like, what happened to you? Oh my God, this is so crazy. So it was just one of those moments in time where I don't know if you believe in the universe and power or energy, but I just felt like it was my lucky break. I needed an opportunity. I had some really hard stuff going in my personal life, and the universe gave me a platform to stand on. And that's kind of how I see it, is that I was basically given this opportunity to share my creative soul or heart or whatever you want to call it expression with others, and that's actually my purpose here on the planet, right, like for the rest of my life. So as corny as that sounds, that's kind of how I roll these days. So and that's
corny,
enough.
it's fantastic.
That's enough. That's just enough. Like, I don't need to be anything bigger than that, and that's I always encourage people to ask yourself, where is it that your heart sings? And for me, it's being on a mountain, taking a photo by myself in the middle of nowhere, or with a friend who's doing the same. And that's where I'm happiest. And so I've been lucky to find a way to get paid for it, I guess, by sharing it with other people. So, it hasn't been without its crazy rides, and especially over 2020 and this year, we've lost a lot of business. It's been a huge challenge to keep the business going. And fortunately, because we don't have like an office or a premises or anything, we've managed to keep things ticking over. But it is very touch and go at times at the moment. That we're just really hoping that we can continue to share, New Zealand's beauty with other people when it presents itself, I guess. Yeah.
Definitely. So what, I guess, drew you, and I know it's not away from astro, but to landscape? What about landscape photography sort of drew you in and got you into that, as opposed to the astro where you started?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, actually, Grant, because being an entrepreneur, I quickly could see that I was going to make more money out of getting better at landscapes, because people used to buy landscapes off me for promotions or prints and canvases. I've actually been very lucky to have quite a decent print sale business. And nobody was buying astrophotography shots for their walls. So, I was like, okay, something wrong with this picture. I'm spending a lot of time over here, enjoying myself doing astrophotography, which is cool, but actually people want more landscapes. So what I sort of realized is, and nobody really taught me what to do, I just kind of figured out a whole lot of stuff by trial and error. And I think I just used my common sense a lot of the time. And so what I sort of did when I first started doing landscapes was I'd talk to people about, where's your favorite place? What do you love? Why do you go there? What is it you love about that? Oh, what season do you love going? Stuff like that. And so you'd get it yet again. It was, I guess, that entrepreneur in me where I was connecting with people, and then we might have a coffee and share our story. And if somebody wanted to buy a print or a canvas for their walls, I would usually go to their house if I could, and just measure their wall and, show me where you want to put this, and get my measuring tape out, and, so created like a vibe before they'd even had the picture. So I found that was really successful for me. I kind of invested a bit of my time into people, and then that always paid off a lot in the long run. And sometimes people would buy more than one because I actually went to see them, So I found that to be really successful. And I suppose when you're out adventuring, and you generally, if you're doing astro, you'll often do either a sunset or a sunrise anyway. You just sort of, I guess, become more aware of what's around you. And because I had always, before I did photography, I used to do a lot of guided tours anyway for walking, biking, and cruise ship customers and stuff like that as well over the years. I already had a good understanding of that. I mean, I grew up on horses. I grew up on a farm. I've always had a connection with nature. I just hadn't really realised that I had an ability to capture that feeling. And I think that was something that I love about landscapes is when I go out now, I often will wait for the weather to be what I want it to be, rather than being in a, when you go to a place and you're not going back again, obviously you've got to take the shot because you're not able to return. But if you're in a place where, like you are at the beach and like I am at the mountains, that I can go there multiple times, then I'm trying to capture a feeling or an expression of the place, if you like. Yeah. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
makes a lot. That really resonates.
Yeah. And I think it's not until you actually sit, which we're not very good at doing as human beings these days, are we? We're always in a hurry. And I think being a parent, I find that also challenging. I'm always got a big list to tick off of jobs I've got to do, and, if you've got another job or you're running another business, you've always got tasks all the time. You've got to tick off your list, and I think sometimes we've got it upside down, right? Like if you actually just took the moments to sit, especially in a place where you live, sit and ponder in the sunrise when other people are sleeping.
Yep.
That's when you sometimes find your greatest ideas for life. And I don't know about anyone else, but that, isn't that what we're here for? Like, take your coffee, sit at the beach. Even if you don't take a photo, like you might take the photo the next time you come. It's just all about connecting with a place, with a feeling, with nature, and then you capture that in your lens. And I think that's something that I do quite intuitively. I might take some shots in a certain way, and then realize actually that's not what I wanted. I'm going to change this around, or I might change my lens even. And I'm just going to wait for a wee while for the sun to change or rise a bit more or whatever. And then, in a split second, you might only get a moment's opportunity to get the shot you actually are thinking of. So sometimes you might need to come back the next 3 mornings in a row to get the shot too. So I love that about landscape photography, because it's actually probably become my counselor or my healer or whatever you want to call it, for life in a lot of ways, because I know when I'm feeling agitated, and I guess this is a challenging thing in these lockdown times, it's not as easy to get out, but you can still get your camera out in your backyard even and find something to take a photo of, challenge yourself to learn a new strategy, different angles, different light. For me, I'm always shooting for the light in my landscapes. I probably tend to shoot probably 2, maybe 1 or 2 stops lower than a lot of other people, because that's just how I like it. And then I'll edit that accordingly, depending on your camera, of course, because every camera's got its different ways of dealing with the low light. The 60 is quite good for that because it's an Astro style camera. So I mean, at the end of the day, it just depends. Like, the other thing about me is I'm a bit of a rogue photographer in a lot of ways with my landscapes, because most of my landscapes are handheld.
Okay.
So that's quite unusual for a lot of New Zealanders. Most New Zealanders will probably shoot with their tripod. So I do a bit of a mix these days because people want to do both when you're on workshops. But when I first started, for the first year of doing landscapes, I didn't even use a tripod. So I've probably got quite good at that, I guess. And a lot of the stuff that I did around that was waiting for the scene to change, rather than using a filter or something like that. So, it's been interesting, because I think I've taught myself a lot of stuff because I just don't kind of go the same way as everybody else. I like to kind of challenge things a wee bit and try something different. Or if my mind tells me, if you did this, this, and this, then you'll get that result, I'm like, I want to try that, see if that works. I don't know, just like to challenge myself out there and give things a go. And this last 12 months or so, I've been really involved in a couple of big projects for a tourism board for what you would call sports photography or outdoor adventure photography, helping them to get a library of images for marketing the area for Canterbury, Mackenzie and Waitaki. So that's been really cool because I've learned a lot of new stuff and worked with videographers and that kind of stuff, as you're probably aware, is pretty go. There's not much time definitely. to sit and ponder. So I guess having had that experience of handheld shooting helped me in that way too, because I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to take on those contracts had I not have done a lot of that before.
Yep, I get it.
Yeah. So, we're ever evolving in this current climate.
So, Rachel, when you go into the field, do you, when you're shooting for yourself, do you go into the field with a concept, or do you let the concept come to you by reacting to the landscape and the light?
Probably about 50-50, to be honest. I think I used to be completely just let's go and see what's there and have a shot. But these days I do tend to plan things out a bit more than I used to. I think, because I've been to some places where I realise, and I'll go back, that there are, certain different compositions that would be better afterwards, or I might wait to a certain time of year or different weather or whatever. Particularly in the Aoraki Mount Cook National Park, because we get such 4 seasons, there are times of the year where it's just more spectacular sometimes. So, yeah, probably 50-50. I still love the challenge of going to a new place, not really knowing what it's like and seeing what I can create from that. I think that sort of feeds me creatively as well. Sure. Yeah. I don't like to be too super organised in my life in any way, so I think that's part of it. I'm not a analytical type of person by nature, so that's probably part of it. If you were, you would be probably a lot more planning things out in more detail than I probably do. It's just how I roll, really.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about Mackenzie Country and the area around where you live. Do you find that shapes your photography and in what way does it shape that photography?
Yeah, good question, actually. It used to be just where I was all the time, and partly because I was busy and just where I was at, and definitely has shaped my photography. I've been very fortunate to be known in my area for my work, because I was at the time one of very few people that actually lived in the area, because it is pretty, out in the Southern Alps, bit of in the middle of nowhere. It's not near a city, so a lot of people come and go to those areas for a week or two every season, but they don't live there. Whereas for me, being local, that was definitely an advantage. And I think probably, to be honest, got a little bit lazy at times, because you just knew where you were going to go, park up type of thing. Because I often had my kids with me, I would have a lot of strategic places I could park up, take a photo, jump back in and go home, all within like a half an hour time frame. And, stuff like Aurora, which I did quite a bit of in that area, was a bit like that as well, because I often had my kids with me. So it's kind of a needs must sometimes, I think. And as I sort of started to develop my work a bit more, I realised that I wanted to try some new things. So I've sort of branched out a little bit, specifically over the last wee while. I have done quite a lot of work down in Fiordland and the West Coast, which I really love, and it's a completely different sort of colour palette, because in the Mackenzie you have sort of these layers of colour, and if you've been there you'll know what I mean by that. If you haven't been there, it is a very dry tussock yellowy brown base. You'll often have a lake between that, which is aqua blue snow-fed mountain, sort of a lake or river.
Yep.
Then you've got your brown mountain. You often have a snow layer on that mountain, and then you've got your sky. So you've got, 5-6 layers going on.
Mm-hmm.
Often for me, I always found the challenge to look at where I wanted my focal point to be in the image, because that's something that I work a lot on. There's lots of really cool parts of those Mackenzie images that could be your focal point depending on the end shot you wanted, that kind of thing. And because for me, a lot of the time doing handheld, that was quite important to me as to what I was doing as well. So I'm a bit of a mountain lover. So going from that to, different environments where there's a lot of running water,
Yep.
dark, shady tree areas, that kind of stuff. That was a good challenge because it's quite different settings. And, just trying to, I guess, rather than looking with your eye, 50 kilometres away from you, you're actually looking quite close, a lot closer in some of these other environments. So that was really good for me. And I've also, in the last 12 months, and been involved in a really special project for me that is a passion project, but I love to do, which was with the Kaimanawa wild horses, which was out in the national park at Waiuru in the army camp. They have a couple of bands of wild Brumby type looking horses. They're called Kaimanawas, and you'll have the similar ones over there. And there's a bit of a story behind that as to how that all came together, because originally those horses used to get rounded up and culled every year, which was a pretty horrific thing. And then a group of really amazing people came together and formed a charitable trust to help those horses. And now between the New Zealand Army, the Department of Conservation, and the Kaimanawa Heritage Horses Trust, they actually retame and rehome all those horses every year. So I was really lucky to go on to the photography tour of that this year, and it's been such a cool experience, and obviously quite different, a moving target in the landscape rather than just the landscape itself. So that was really cool, and I'm actually now doing some more work with them. So that's been really exciting addition. And I think this is the thing, right? Like, you're always I guess trying new things, and sometimes you don't always know where it's going to end up, and I quite like that about photography. So and this year I'm doing a bit more work in the North Island. So the North Island and the South Island are very different in terms of landscapes. So a lot more green, lush, panga type plants and flowers and ferns and forest and things like that. So that'll be quite a cool a lot of waterfalls, which is really cool. So
cool.
Different things all the time. And I was supposed to go to Iceland in 2020, so I missed out on that so far, but really, really excited to go and do that in the future sometime. But I think we are pretty lucky in New Zealand to have all these different landscapes so close by.
Yeah, well, bar, I guess, some of the more radical mountain shapes that you might have there in Iceland, you pretty much got a similar sort of terrain, with mountains, with ice fields, glaciers, even the odd volcano. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm really excited about that volcano. I don't know, I just keep looking at the live streams all the time. I'm so excited about it. My kids think I'm nuts. I just think it's so amazing. I don't know if you follow Chris Burkhardt, but he was over there not long after that, and so cool. Like, I don't know, it's just one of those things that gets in your bones that you just want to do, I think. So I'd love to go there, but I also would love to go to Canada. I think that's another place that's I guess kind of similar, but it's just so big. That's the thing about New Zealand, it's a small place, and a lot, in respect to a lot of other countries. So I think we kind of have that in our blood, Kiwis. Like, we just want to get out from down under. You probably have the same, go somewhere different.
Yeah, I think everyone has that that I guess landscape jealousy. You know, I look at New Zealand and Canada and Iceland and go, yeah, I'd really like to shoot that. But I know some people, you know, that shoot in the States and Canada and whatever, and they'd love to be here doing the beaches and the outback and so forth. So, you know, that's
Absolutely. You've got some
you always want
spectacular
something you
scenes.
haven't got.
I know. You got some spectacular scenes there too, though, I feel. Yeah.
Oh,
And I think
absolutely. Yeah.
it's, you know, New Zealand is a 4 seasons in one day kind of place sometimes. So, you know,
Yeah.
as a photographer, that's pretty cool. You can, you know, experience some. We've actually had some pretty crazy storms here over the last couple of weeks, actually. And there was actually one up in the mountains last night and today, actually. But yeah, it can be, especially at this time of year, September, October, can be just crazy weather in the same day. You're just like, what's going on? And I think that's, you know, it's really cool for the senses, all that stuff, right? It's, I
absolutely.
don't know, you'll hear me talk about this all the time, but photography is a vehicle for a lot of people, I think, to, you know, help you to grow your own self. And I think that's such a cool way of doing it, rather than
definitely.
lots of other types of ways you could choose. So we are lucky that we're able to do that. And, you know, here in New Zealand, you'll probably laugh at us at times, but my friends always laugh at me because I'm always wanting to know what's the weather forecast. They're like, oh my God, like, you're not checking that again, are you? You know, like, and I think it comes with farming as well.
Yep.
You grow up on a farm, you're always looking at the weather. And,
yeah,
you know, become a photographer.
What's going to happen in the next couple of hours, because you might need to do a little bit different work than you thought you're going to start with.
Exactly. So, you know, and with night sky, you're very particular about that stuff. And I guess that's where I am particular at certain times. And, you know, looking at where the Milky Way is rising and what time. And I know a lot of that stuff off my head, but you know, when I first started out, I had a bit of advice from a mate of mine, Jordan McAnally from Undersoul Photography. He's a really good astrophotographer, and he said, you know, go for the first year of your astrophotography without using apps. Just do it with your mind. And I was like, that's such a good idea. So I actually took that on board, and so I trained my brain to know where things are, just like you do with the sun. At different times of the season, the astro season, because you know, that's just something that I wanted to master a wee bit more. And so sometimes I'll use apps now. I'll use photo pills sometimes with clients, because you have to be in a hurry, but you don't have to have all that fancy stuff. And I think that's something that's really important for people to realize if you're new to photography, is just go and shoot with what you've got. Because I started out as a single mum with no money, and I had 160, 124mm Samyang lens that was secondhand, and I had 124 to 105 Canon, and that was all I had. I had a crappy tripod, and I think I had 2 batteries and 2 SD cards, and that was it. That was all I had. So I was just like, well, I've got to make this work. If I want to be up there with the big boys, I've got to get out there. And I guess maybe in some ways that was actually to my advantage, because being female in astrophotography is also a little bit different as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very male dominated field in a lot of ways. I think that's starting to change, but, you know, I don't know if it's been the same in Aussie, but New Zealand's kind of gone through this sort of a real revival of astrophotography over the last 5 years. Like this, all of a sudden, there's just like all these people doing astrophotography.
It's definitely grown over here too.
It's been pretty cool. And, you know, my long-term passion is actually to teach youth photography for adventure, landscapes, outdoors, astro, whatever they want to do. And, you know, help them with moving forward in their lives through photography. So I probably always had that in the back of my mind because of my own journey and my own children, just wanting to share the magnificence of what we actually have here in New Zealand to help people understand how that can impact their lives. I don't know, it's quite a cool opportunity to be able to do, and you can actually do it here in New Zealand quite simply. It's not that hard. So I think that's our gift as a country. We, provided obviously we're not on lockdowns and things, there's a lot of things that we can do here that are not difficult logistically wise and all of that, because of the size, and people are often used to being outdoors.
Yep.
All of that. So I'm hoping that that'll be something I can create as time goes by. Really love to have like a charitable trust or something like that for youth photography. And I've had a couple of kids I've taken out who've come from, not the best environment or challenging circumstances, and gave them a camera to keep, and they're just like beside themselves, and take them out for a week around the Mackenzie, and not just teach them how to take photos, but just talk to them about life and get out there and realize that you can give anything a go, and I think that's what photography does for me as well. I tend to take out a lot of women attract obviously to come with me at night. That's another advantage in a way, I guess. And I think that's quite special to be able to empower other women and men too, but particularly in the night sky field, it just seems to be a special thing that I get to do. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, I think, I know I follow quite a few Kiwi photographers, both male and female. And I think, you're spoilt for choice in terms of some of the landscapes and whatever that you've got. But one thing that's really stood out for me, particularly in social media, particularly on Twitter, in fact, is the sense of community that there seems to be in New Zealand with, between the photographers, and in particular in that sort of astro field and landscape field, that, it seems to be quite a strong bond, I guess, between some of the photographers there, that, it's probably reflective of the size of the size of the country, I guess, and the closeness that you might feel towards the landscape as well.
Yeah, it's been really cool, and it's cool you point that out actually, because we kind of forget about that sometimes. It's a very tight-knit sort of a community. There are a lot of people who choose to not be a part of it, and that's fine. But there are a lot of people who, connect, and social media has definitely obviously been a contributor to that. And I think Instagram was definitely a bit of a catalyst for that kind of vibe in New Zealand, because when it first came out here, kind of became a thing, would have been about 2013, 2014, something like that. And that was kind of like where, I think that's one thing about Kiwis, were quite early adopters to stuff like to technology. So there was just like this big influx of all these people on Instagram, and then everybody's like, wow, did you see so-and-so's pictures? And oh my God, did you see this? And and it just kind of took off all of a sudden. And a lot of those people were already there before, but you just weren't aware of it as much. Definitely not as much as like Facebook. And I think that Instagram kind of propelled that. And I've noticed this whole, as you say, the Twitter NFT space, which is where I've met you. It's yet again, there's been quite a bit of an influx of people, and we kind of all trust each other, I think, to go, okay, hey, let's do this. So there's a lot of camaraderie, as well as connection in there, which I think is quite good as well. Everybody's kind of, I guess, going to the same spots, because it is a small place, and all of that as well. So I think it's actually really healthy, and the fact that it gets, for me anyway, I think that it's what I like to do is to take my shot that I see. Sure. I don't compare my shot to anyone else's, or think someone's is better than someone else's or whatever. And I think that that's really important as a landscape photographer, as well as to take what is from your heart and soul, or whatever you see, and capture that, because that's actually your own essence. Totally. And that, what I've found is really cool about that for myself, is that people have this kind of like expectation on my account, my Instagram account, to go, oh, well, this is what we're expecting from you. And it's actually a really interesting conversation, because people that often follow you sort of almost feel like they're invested into what you share and who you are and all of that. And I find that's actually quite fascinating, and it's really cool that people even care because they love your work. And I personally found that to be like 99% of the time really positive. So I think that is really special. And for me, I've got my people who will then reshare my work, or somebody goes, oh, who's the person to do, who should I buy a print from? And so I get referrals and things like that. And I think that relationship that you can build, and I've found that on Twitter as well. Like, I've met some people online that I've never met in person that have just seemed to be the most genuine, kind, lovely people who actually genuinely want to help you. And it's just like, oh, wow, this is so cool, because you just never would have had any other probably way in real life to meet that person. So I think that's one real special thing about social media. I had a bit of a up and down relationship with Facebook for a while there, and a friend of mine said to me, like, you're putting your emotion onto a social media platform. It doesn't owe you anything. It's actually just a software program. And I was like, actually, that really hit me on the head. Like, actually, that's so true. Like, I don't actually have to have any feelings about how I feel about a social media platform, because it's just software. Right. And it was quite a cool way, because I think we get really caught up in all that stuff sometimes. And, especially these last couple of years, there's just been so much crazy stuff on social media. It's just definitely. Like, what on earth? And I see people going, oh, that's it, I'm out. I'm not having anything to do with social media. It's just too crazy or whatever. And I'm just like, well, hang on a second. If you just deliver to the platform your message, whichever is your photo or whatever, and then you jump off, that's what it's there for. And I'm just consistently doing that, because I think that's just, for me, it's a place to share my stuff. People who like my stuff will look. And, at the moment, that seems to work quite well. So I don't know. I don't care how many followers I've got. In fact, I couldn't even tell you how many followers I've currently got. Wouldn't have a clue, but I don't care about that. It's just about connecting with people in terms of sharing something cool. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about people being helpful. I was in a Twitter space a couple of days ago, and a couple of people were talking. I was just listening, but a couple of people were talking, and one guy was saying, he was, going to be launching his an NFT collection of his, and this guy that was talking to him basically offered him to do a promotional video for it for free. And I was like, wow, there's people sort of willing to help people out at that kind of level without any expectation of, anything in return. And, when you see that sort of thing in the community, and, some people might say, oh, well, he's devaluing his efforts and his work. But, I don't necessarily see it that way, because I see that as him, reaching out a hand to help somebody else, as opposed to that may not have the skills or ability to do what he can do,
yeah, absolutely.
But it's really interesting, particularly in the last, say, 6 months since Twitter started their Spaces area. That, for me in particular, has really changed the game in terms of how social media, how I've been interacting with social media, and how I'm perceiving it. But
yeah, it's quite fascinating, isn't it? I think, like, Twitter for me is quite hard yakka, because I haven't got much time on my hands. So I find that quite challenging, but I just get in there when I can and have a go. But I know what you mean about the Spaces. I really, especially when we're on, full lockdown here a few weeks back, I just spent like 4 nights in a row just listening to it, and it was really helpful and positive. and nice to just go, okay, well, there are lots of other people in the same position, and, well, as you say, willing to help out. And I think what's cool about this time in the world is that people like that guy you're just talking about, he wouldn't do that for every person he comes across
No, absolutely.
in a Twitter space, but he just felt that in that moment that was the right thing to do for him to help that person. And imagine if we all did that. And I think this is the thing I find about particularly photography, tourism and stuff like that in New Zealand, is it was getting pretty out of control before COVID. So we had some crazy stuff going on in our country. We're about to have 5 million tourists arrive every year into a population of 5 million. So I blame Peter Jackson double. But we didn't have the infrastructure, and I don't know if this is a conversation for the podcast, but we didn't have the community infrastructure. Was a mess because we didn't have enough housing for our own people. So there's been a lot of stuff that has happened over that time. It's been hard, but there's and people like me, I've lost my whole income and had to start again twice because we've had 2 lockdowns, and that's been pretty shit. But at the same time, I've gained a lot of things out of it, and it's really made me ask myself some hard questions about what's my purpose. And I think that's something that's really powerful. And also I've spent a lot more time with my kids, even though I always sort of did before, but I've been more purposeful about that as well. And I don't know, I think it's going to be really cool in the future. We're going to have a different way of doing things, but people will still be out there enjoying nature and taking awesome photos just like we did before. It's just going to take a bit of time to change things around. But I think in a lot of ways it'll be a better version of ourselves, right? Like for those, I guess, for those of us that choose that option, we might choose to be nicer or kinder or more helpful. That's not involving money. And I personally have experienced that in landscape photography a lot in my journey, that a lot of people have been really kind to me and shared their knowledge. So I think that's really cool, and why wouldn't you, at the end of the day. So
absolutely,
even though I run workshops now, I still have I don't really advertise it, but I have free groups that people can join adventures for free sometimes when I'm just going out, and I'll be like, hey, who wants to come? So I think at the end of the day, you get a strategy that works for you. And I think the Twitter strategy is really interesting for New Zealand because Twitter is not a normal thing that Kiwis do. We're not Twitter people.
Well, it used to be known as a real political cesspit, and particularly US and UK politics, with Brexit and the Trump years of his presidency and whatever, and it just sort of seemed to be this polarizing political landscape that didn't really help anyone communicate well. But the photography community, on the other hand, I think is, almost globally in the last 6 months, just sort of pulled together like I've never seen it done before.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think, I've met people from overseas as well and in different places. And, I think even people like Gary V, they've pulled that whole community together as well, not just photography, but creative arts. And to me, that's really cool because we've always kind of been a bit behind the 8 ball from being a real business. People are like, did you do photography for a living? Oh, okay. Like they don't know what to say next because it's like, okay, is that a real job?
Isn't that a hobby?
Yeah. And I guess to be fair, for most people, it probably is a hobby, but
very much so. Yeah.
I think the arts are becoming a lot more. It's becoming a lot more acceptable. Not that I care what anyone thinks about that, but it's becoming a lot more acceptable for people to choose that direction, which is probably 25% of the population is geared like that. So it's really cool that a place like Twitter has the platform, and so I think Instagram to a degree too, but at the moment Twitter seems to be quite free of an algorithm, but I don't know about that, but it
Yeah.
seems okay.
I think there's definitely an algorithm there, but I'm not sure exactly.
Not quite so bad as some of the others. Yeah. But I'm always a believer. People go, "Oh, Facebook's just mucking with the algorithm, whatever." But actually, what I've found is that really good content always gets shared. So I think that's actually a really key point to social media is. And the NFT space is quite interesting. I've seen some stuff on there where I'd go, "Oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting." But and I think that's definitely about relationships. People that have worked hard on that, and good luck to them.
Absolutely.
But some really good work out there that hasn't even been shared yet. That's the other thing. That's
totally,
from what I can understand.
And I'm finding new photographers all the time that I've never seen or heard of that. And seeing their work for the first time and just being blown away by some of the things that I'm seeing. But
some of the young ones are incredible, and because in New Zealand, it'll be the same in Aussie, but in New Zealand we have photography as a subject at high school now. Yep. So there's all those young ones who have just got that natural flair, which is really special and cool as well. Yeah. There's a couple of young fellas actually on the Twitter spaces and that are like 19, 16, 20. Like I'm just like an awe of them.
I've seen 15, 16-year-old photographers that I think are better than me,
Oh, they're amazing. They're amazing. Yeah. But, and that's really inspiring, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's what I think what you're saying is that everyone together, it doesn't matter what, where you come from, what shape, color, whatever, you can all prosper or connect or whatever. I think that's why I like spaces, because it's not a video, and probably why I like podcasts, because I don't have to show my face, which probably sounds weird, but I think there's like an element of freedom and just listening to voices rather than video.
Definitely.
Which is kind of cool, because you also actually have to actively listen.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was in a space. I think it was last weekend, and there was a guy on from Kampala in Ethiopia. Uganda. Wow. And he'd gone. He's amazing portrait photographer. William something or other. Sorry, I can't remember his name off the top of my head because it was a week ago and my head's full of other stuff now. But he'd gone out for breakfast and was walking down the street listening to but interacting in a space, and you had this whenever he was talking, you had this background noise of the streets of Kampala in Uganda going on, and it was just a really unusual experience that you've got this this guy first thing in the morning in Kampala. I'm sitting at home in my lounge room at 6 or 7 o'clock at night or whenever it was, and listening to the streetscape, I guess, of Kampala. It was just fascinating to be a part of.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, and I think that's the thing I think about me starting in photography too, to be brutal. When I first started, I think people looked at me as a single mum through Women's Refuge, trailing around with these 3 children, like, who the hell is she? Like, honestly, I think people didn't rate me at all, and that was okay, because we do that in life. But I just was like, actually, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I think it was the fact that people judged me, or I felt, maybe they didn't, but I felt they did a lot. Not everybody, we had a couple of really cool friends, but I think that helped me to actually get better at it, because I didn't take it as a personal attack. I just went, okay, I can see I don't fit the normal mold. That's cool. I get that. But I'm just going to go out there and do this. And, I guess because I had nothing to lose, I just went for it. And I felt like I was fairly under the radar and a wee bit. I tried to be quite humble about what I was doing. And so, people just helped me. So I like to sort of get that in there in my talks, because I think it's really important for people who feel like they can't do it. Actually, if I can do it, you can definitely do it,
Definitely. Talking about your workshops, workshops, or going back to talk about your workshops, what would somebody coming on a Rachel Gillespie workshop expect to experience?
Yep, sweet. So we have a couple of different options. So sometimes it's just me, other times it's me and a couple of my colleagues who I work with. So we actually have in our photography workshop business, it's called Southern Photography Adventures. We have 5 photographers, and we're all based in different parts of South Island. So if there's 2 or 3 or 4 people, I might just take them myself. If there's more than that, then we'll have 2 tutors. Sometimes we might even have 3 tutors, depending on the number of people. So predominantly it's usually about a 3-night, 4-day sort of a gig, or it could be a private one-on-one, depending on what people are looking for.
Yep.
We find the group shots are really interactive and people get to know each other and have a bit of fun and all that together as well. So that seems to be quite popular to come on that. And so usually we will meet up and everyone gets to have a bit of an introduction. We'll talk about our schedule and our itinerary, which we always set beforehand, often subject to the weather because of the changing alpine environment that we're in. But we try and, stick to that as much as we can. And I like to go through and ask people what they came for and what they're expecting and, what do they want to take away when they go home, so that we can make sure as a tutor that we can give them, what they're looking for, what they paid for, basically, to come along to a workshop. So usually we find that people go home with obviously a lot more than they're expecting. We do post-processing as well as part of the workshops. So depending on the weather, again, we'll possibly go out and shoot a whole bunch of raw files first before we get into editing, depending on weather patterns. We want to obviously get as much content as possible. So sometimes the editing's more or less, depending if it's raining or something like that. And then we have follow-on editing options for people once they've obviously gone home and online and things like that. We're just in the process of creating some videos. We try to keep it real personal and face to face as much as we can. We don't really want to set up a online business, but we're sort of trying to also realize that everybody's got different wants and needs and things as well. But there's so much content on the internet already on YouTube that you can get some of that stuff from there anyway. So our experience, I guess you could call it, is more of a out in the field. We'll take you to our favorite spots. We'll teach you how to get there. We'll teach you why you would do certain things. We'll teach you how to read the weather and, what time. Like when people are new to it, they don't even realise to go an hour before sunset or sunrise. So
they turn up at sunset or sunrise.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of simple things at the start when you're a beginner. So we do have a lot of beginners. We also have right up to advanced. So we have different workshops sometimes. And then we also have 2 sort of different genres. So we'll have a workshop where you can pretty much get out of the car and take a bunch of shots and then get back in, or you can go on a walk to a glacier and a bit of an adventure and stretch your legs.
Awesome.
It's more moderate fitness. So it just depends on where people sit. So sometimes we might have somebody who's like 18 and then somebody who's 65 on a workshop, and then a whole bunch in between. So we have to just work that through depending on what we've got. Most of our workshops are targeted to the season, so we might do autumn leaves and stars, or spring and stars, or astrophotography, winter landscapes. Just depends on the time of the year, really. Usually, like at the moment, we've got our whole 2022 charted out for the year ahead. Could be a bit interesting to see how that actually pans out this time, but we've got it out there, so let's hope that happens. So I've just introduced a new product this year, which is a 10-day South Island tour, which I've had some pretty good success with so far in terms of bookings. So let's hope that happens. And
cool.
I'm quite excited about that, because I think what's really important for me, as I've sort of said already, is it's important for me to actually connect with people, not just teach them how to take photos. So with those 10-day adventures, you get to spend quite a lot of time together, and I think it's through the having a good chat, like even we are today. You learn things, how to do things by just talking. You might be sitting having lunch and talking about something, and then they click. Oh,
Yep.
that's what you meant when you said that the other night,
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I've definitely done that over the months later, where I've been out with somebody and then something's clicked and I've gone, oh, that's what he meant all those months ago, and I didn't quite get it.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. Yep.
Yeah, and so we find a lot of our photography clients come to multiple events because they love what we're about and how we do things, and just the way we roll. So that's pretty special. I think if you weren't getting repeat business, then you might need to take a look at your strategy. That's how I think about it. If I wasn't getting repeat customers, I'd be having to have a look at why not. So that's pretty cool. And what we find is a lot of our repeat customers, they don't have friends who do photography outside of their normal lives. So I like to provide a space for people like that as well, who just want to come with other photographers to do cool stuff. So yeah, we try and price it sort of middle of the road. We're not cheap, but we're not expensive. We're kind of in the middle. And that's quite a challenge at times to get right. New Zealanders at the moment, where all our clients are Kiwis, so they're a lot harder on the price than maybe someone from overseas.
A lot of people of Scottish descent there, isn't there?
Apparently. Spend all their money on whiskey. No. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's definitely hard. Like when I was doing my tourism business and photography guiding, I was making 4 times the amount per client than I am now. So that makes a big difference. It was probably a bit ridiculous, to be fair, but that was the going rate. So people used to pay it, and we were very lucky. But, I think as time goes by, we'll get possibly a bit more of a balance around that. And it's not always about making money. It's about experience and taking people to cool places. And, so long as you can feed your family, then I guess that's pretty cool. So,
and I think that's one of the hardest parts for photographers in particular is that question around pricing, whether it be a wedding photographer, whether it be print pricing, whether it be, experience pricing, it is tough to come up with, okay, so where am I placing myself in the market? What am I, what are my costs and how do I cover those, and how do I, what kind of profit margin am I going to put on it? And
absolutely. It took me a while to figure that out too, actually. And I think because I had that entrepreneurial background, I had probably a bit more experience in that already. But I think I guess you got to decide, like, if you want to make money from your photography, what kind of photographer do you want to see yourself in the marketplace? It's almost like hopping outside of your own body and having a look above, I just decided I had I've always been about quality. So I wanted to have high quality prints on high quality paper. So that was my thing. And then I learnt a lot about paper. I didn't really understand that at the start, and it took me a while to figure that out, that not all printers and papers are the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I use German fine art rag and sometimes a few other bits and bobs, but mostly German paper. And I'm just looking into there's possibly some new stuff coming to New Zealand that's made from bamboo, which would be quite cool for the carbon footprint thing. And so I just decided, right, I'm going to do high-end prints on high-end paper with really high quality ink. So that was after my research of looking at all the options, that was my strategy, and I don't ever change that. So my prints aren't cheap, but they're quality. So I think that's something you have to decide for yourself if you want to print stuff out. I wanted something that was going to be something you could put in a frame as a fine art print and, hand that down to other generations. So that's what I do. and people seem to be quite happy to pay for that quality. I probably missed some sales because of that as well, but it's just a choice you got to make, I guess. I didn't want to go down to the local photocopy shop and print them out on, basic Canon paper or something like that, because they just don't last. So,
no, I know.
But I'm not telling people what to do. I sell a lot of canvases. A lot of people go to places like Canvas Factory. I wouldn't do that personally, but okay. I want the higher end, and all my pictures are varnished as well. So,
sure.
Excuse me. I think if you really want to provide quality, then it's worth looking into that. So I personally make about 100% markup on my pictures. So
right, okay.
I think it's very achievable. Some people make more than that. Just depends on what you want to do. In this current market, I've chosen not to discount because I don't feel desperate or the need to sell a whole lot of stuff. If I was struggling to pay my bills, I might do that, but I'm trying to maintain my level of pricing as much as I can. I did put my commercial rate down quite a bit over 2020 just to get some work, but I've actually recently put that back up to what it was before, because I've kind of got to the stage where I'm like, okay, I did 18 months of basically half price. I'm not going to do that anymore. So
fair enough.
It just becomes like your own barometer, I guess. It's like if you were working for somebody else, how much you're willing to take a pay cut, type of thing. So, and it's just, I guess it's goods and services. If people want to buy, cheap shoes versus fancy shoes, it's kind of the same thing with prints, I guess.
Definitely. What do you like to do when you're not shooting?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't really do a hell of a lot else other than working, shooting, and being a mum, to be honest. Yeah, I'm pretty dedicated to the camera. It's my thing. So I pretty much feel like I'm not really working when I'm out. So I guess that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't mind a good coffee. I don't know. I go camping, so I've got a wee caravan, and so I love to get that all ready to go and set up camp, and just the whole experience of being out camping and in the outdoors. And even if I'm not taking photos, it's just about being out in nature, I guess. I'm pretty simple. I'm pretty cheap to run, mate. I don't go shopping.
Fair enough.
I'm not your normal female, really. I'm quite happy about that.
So if you weren't a photographer, what would you be?
Well, originally when I was young, I always wanted to be a horse trainer and work with horses. So probably something along those lines. And it's been really neat to get back into the wild horses photography, because I'm also getting, some pretty cool connections through New Zealand horse industry, because people I'm working with there are quite well known. One of the girls, Kelly Wilson, she's a pretty good horse photographer herself. So that's been pretty neat. I don't know where that's going to take me. I used to ride horses a lot, so I'd love to somehow maybe get into doing a bit of what they call liberty training, which is sort of like the horse whispering. I probably would have done that if I hadn't got off that track. But back in the day, when I was young, which is quite a long time ago, it was sort of really not a money-making industry to be in. So had I followed my heart, I probably would have been a horse trainer, but I didn't. So it's funny how the world brings you back around to those loves again, isn't it? Yeah. Definitely. I do love being a mum as well, and I think that my expectation of what I thought being a mum was going to be was very, very different to what it actually ended up being. I never ever imagined I would be a single mum going through women's refuge. So I'm pretty open about it, because I think it's really important to help other people through these things. And absolutely. I'm pretty happy with who I am these days. It was a bit of a journey to get through that, but I think, if you have a good family around you or friends who you call family, then you're pretty successful. That's my interpretation of life.
No, that's great. That's great. So, are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to, bringing onto the podcast that you're seeing around the traps?
Oh, mate, I can give you a list.
I know.
There's plenty of Kiwis out there. Yeah, I mean, I do some really cool work with a few of my own colleagues. So, of course, I'll be referring them on to you. You might know, I think you know Megan Maloney.
Yep.
Off Twitter. So her and I do a few workshops together, and Douglas Thorne. He's also one of the guys I work with down in Fiordland, down at Milford Sound. He's a pretty successful full-time photographer himself. And then I've got a couple of others. I've got Joseph Paulian, Lake Tekapo, Rach Roberts on the West Coast, and Jordan McAnally from Queenstown. So they're those guys are my colleagues that I work with
Right.
on there. But I mean, if you want a specific subject, just sing out, and I can there's heaps of different cool characters that I could refer you onto for sure.
Oh, definitely. And if I ever run out, I've got a very, very long list. But if I ever run out,
you'll be doing it 3 nights a week.
Well, to be honest, I have actually been doing a couple a week, just to build up a bit of a backlog, so that if I, for whatever reason, basically I'm kind of prepping for when I can go out and shoot, and the time when I do expect that I'm probably going to spend more time taking photos than I am doing podcasts about it. So,
exactly.
I wanted to build a little bit of a backlog so that I could miss a week or two without too much drama. So
thanks so much for having me on. It's been awesome, and hopefully people got something useful out of that. And if you come over to New Zealand sometime, we'll be able to do something live on the lake.
Definitely, that sounds like a fantastic idea. And if you're ever in Sydney, just give us a tingle, and we'll go and shoot a swimming pool or something somewhere.
Sounds awesome, mate.
Well, before you go, I've got one last and probably the most important question of all. Yeah. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I do. It's that thing, isn't it? You're either in or you're out.
That's right. You can't be on one side of the fence or the other.
But do you know what? My pizzas are always gluten-free, so I'm that person.
Okay. Cool. You have
awesome.
I've got one more question for you. Do you have violet crumble or crunchy over there, or both?
I don't think we have violet crumble here. We only have crunchy. Yeah,
might be.
I remember that from living in Sydney. Yeah. No, crunchy all the way. It's pavlova, by the way, as well.
I'm not gonna enter into that argument.
It was lucky we didn't talk rugby.
No, definitely. Mind you, the old Wobblies had a win last night against the Argentinians, which was all right.
Oh, good on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the last rugby game I watched was actually at Milford Sound Lodge while we're in the middle of a workshop, and it was Aussie Kiwis a few months back. I think it was one of the Bledisloes. So
I'm pretty sure I know who won.
There's a bit of hurrahing going on.
I can imagine. Oh well, one year we'll get a team that can actually beat the All Blacks, but I don't think it'll be this year or next year somehow. They got a lot
never
of work
say never, eh?
No, definitely not. Well, I remember the good old days in the 80s and 90s when we had a team which could beat the All Blacks, which wasn't too bad, but
Yeah, actually, I must admit I remember that myself. I'm old enough for that.
Never mind. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, Rachel. It's been absolutely a joy to sit and listen to you talk and find out about how you do your thing, and get to know you a little bit better. Where can people find your work?
Awesome, thank you. Just on Instagram is Rachel Gillespie NZ, or my website is nztraveladventure.com.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate you having me on.
No problem. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep on listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnephotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne, and I hope to see you out shooting soon.